Today, Iran sent America written red lines through Pakistan. Trump said, use the phone. China watched both. Let me tell you about two things that happened in the same 24 hours and why the gap between them tells you more about this war than anything else you will read today. The first thing, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi arrived in Islamabad for the second time in 48 hours. He met with Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir, and Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar. He handed Pakistan written messages addressed to the United States of America. According to Iran's semi-official Fars news agency and ISNA, those written messages outline Tehran's red lines in peace negotiations, specifically on two subjects, Iran's nuclear program and the Strait of Hormuz. And embedded within those messages, according to three sources speaking to Axios, was a three-phase proposal for ending the war. Phase 1, a full cessation of hostilities and binding guarantees that America will not strike Iran again and will not strike Lebanon again. Phase 2, management and security of the Strait of Hormuz. Phase 3, and only Phase 3, the final stage after everything else is resolved, Iran's nuclear program. Read that sequence. Ceasefire guarantees, Hormuz, nuclear, in that order. Iran has taken the issue that America calls the entire point of the war, the nuclear program, and moved it to last place. Not because Iran is flexible on nuclear, but because Iran is telling America something very specific with that sequencing. It is telling America, you cannot use the war to extract nuclear concessions at the beginning, because the war itself has to end before we discuss anything that sensitive. First, prove you will not attack us again. Then we talk about the water, then we talk about the atom. And the second thing that happened in the same 24 hours. Trump told Fox News, we're not doing this anymore. We have all the cards. If they want to talk, they can come to us or they can call us. You know, there is a telephone. We have nice secure lines. There is a telephone. Iran sent America written red lines through Pakistan. America pointed at a telephone. I want to spend this video explaining exactly what those two things mean when put next to each other, what the three-phase proposal actually contains, why nuclear being in Phase 3 is not a concession but a negotiating position that America may have no answer to, what Trump's Situation Room meeting Monday means for whether that phone ever gets used, and why China, which has not said a word about any of this, is watching both things unfold and calculating something that neither Iran nor America is saying out loud. Let me start with the written messages and what we actually know about them. The messages were delivered to Pakistani mediators during Araghchi's second visit to Islamabad on Sunday. Fars news agency described them as outlining Iran's red lines on nuclear issues and the Strait of Hormuz. ISNA said they addressed some of the red lines of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Both agencies were careful to add that the exchange of messages does not constitute negotiations. It is, in Iran's framing, an initiative to clarify the situation and Iran's positions. Not a negotiation, a clarification. That distinction matters enormously. If it were a negotiation, both sides would need to respond formally, set up a process, agree on a framework. By calling it a clarification, Iran is doing something more asymmetric. Iran is defining its positions on paper, handing them to a third party, and letting America read them without triggering the diplomatic obligation of a formal response. Iran is saying, here is what we think, here is where we stand, here are the lines we will not cross. Now you know. What you do with that knowledge is your business. America's response was to say there is a telephone. Now let me go deeper on the three-phase proposal itself, because this is the piece that Axios reported from three sources with knowledge of the conversations in Islamabad, and it is the most structurally significant development of the past week. Phase 1. A full cessation of hostilities, binding guarantees that America will not resume strikes on Iran, and importantly, binding guarantees that Israel will not continue bombing Lebanon. This is not a small ask. Israel has killed more than 2,500 people in Lebanon since March 2nd, the Lebanese Health Ministry reported on Sunday. Israel has continued bombing Lebanese villages despite the U.S. brokered ceasefire extension that was signed 3 weeks ago. On Sunday alone, Israeli strikes killed at least 14 people in southern Lebanon, including 2 children. Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu had ordered the military to, in his words, forcefully attack Hezbollah targets. Iran is saying phase 1 of any real deal requires those attacks to stop. Not pause, stop, with guarantees. Phase 2, the Strait of Hormuz. Management, security. Who controls the passage? Who collects the tolls? What framework governs transit? Araghchi spent Sunday in Oman specifically working this question. He met Oman's Sultan Haytham bin Tariq personally, according to CNN, with a photo released by the Iranian Foreign Ministry showing the 2 men shaking hands. The talks in Muscat focused specifically on Hormuz, and according to a regional official speaking to Fortune, Iran is trying to persuade Oman to support a mechanism for collecting tolls from vessels passing through the strait. Oman sits on the other side of the strait. Oman is the country with the best relationships on both sides of this war. Oman ran the back channel that produced every real communication between Washington and Tehran since April 2025. If Oman agrees to be part of a Hormuz management framework, that is not a small diplomatic detail. That is the Strait of Hormuz having a new architecture with Oman inside it that any future American administration would have to negotiate with rather than simply override. Phase 3, the nuclear program. Only after phases 1 and 2 are complete, only after the guns are quiet and the water is governed, only then does Tehran sit down and discuss enrichment. Now, I want to be very clear about why this proposal is not the concession it might superficially appear to be. Because the framing in much of the American coverage is that Iran is offering to delay the nuclear discussion as a compromise. That is not what is happening. Delaying the nuclear discussion to phase 3 is not a concession to America. It is Iran removing the issue that America thinks is its primary leverage, the uranium, from the first part of the conversation and forcing America to negotiate the end of the war and the management of Hormuz without that leverage available. Think about what America needs from phase 3. America needs Iran to surrender or move its 440 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% purity. America needs Iran to suspend enrichment for at least a decade. These are America's war objectives on the nuclear side. Trump has said so. Hegseth has said so. Vance said it in Islamabad. Now think about what Iran's proposal does. It says, agree to a permanent ceasefire first. Guarantee you will not attack us again. Settle the Hormuz question. And only after all of that is done will we discuss the uranium. Which means America would have to end the war, lift the blockade, and give Iran the security guarantees it is asking for, all before the nuclear conversation even begins. If America does that, and then Iran walks away from phase 3, America has given up everything it has and gotten nothing on the thing it said the war was about. That is the trap inside the 3-phase proposal. It looks like flexibility. It is actually a sequencing that strips America of its leverage at the exact moment America would need it most. And there is something even more specific happening here that I think most people are missing. Axios reported that one source said Araghchi made clear to the Pakistani, Egyptian, Turkish, and Qatari mediators over the weekend that there is no consensus inside the Iranian leadership about how to address U.S. demands on the nuclear program. Read that carefully. Araghchi is not saying Iran refuses to discuss nuclear. He is saying Iran's own government does not agree internally on what to offer. That internal division is being used as a diplomatic tool. By acknowledging the division to mediators, Iran is communicating to America. Even if you push hard on nuclear right now, there is nobody in Tehran who has the authority to give you what you want, because the factions have not aligned. So pushing hard on nuclear now will not produce a nuclear concession. It will just produce a collapse of the talks. Therefore, the only path to eventually getting something on nuclear is to move through phases 1 and 2 first, which is exactly what Iran's 3-phase proposal does. That is not confusion. That is a diplomatic judo move. Iran's internal division, which America thinks is a weakness to exploit, is being presented as a structural argument for why America should accept Iran's sequencing. You cannot get what you want by jumping to phase 3. The architecture of the Iranian government will not permit it. So your only path to phase 3 is through phases 1 and 2. This is what we are telling you in writing through Pakistan. This is why Trump's Situation Room meeting on Monday is so consequential. Axios reported from 3 U.S. officials that Trump is expected to convene his top national security and foreign policy team Monday for a meeting specifically about the stalemate in the Iran negotiations and potential next steps. That meeting is happening today as you watch this video. And the question on the table is whether America accepts Iran's three-phase framework, rejects it and does nothing, or rejects it and escalates. Accept it, and America is committing to a process where the nuclear issue comes last, with all of America's leverage gone before that conversation starts. Reject it and do nothing, and the stalemate deepens. Oil stays above $100, Hormuz stays closed, and Chevron CEO telling Face the Nation that the global energy system has lost an incredible amount of stability looks more prescient every day. Reject it and escalate, and there are 3 aircraft carriers in the region waiting to resume operations. All 3 options are on the table in the Situation Room Monday, and this is the most important meeting in the Iran war since the ceasefire was declared on April 8th. Because whatever comes out of that Situation Room will either produce a written response back through Pakistan, which means the written red lines Iran sent are being treated as a serious communication, or it will produce silence, which means America is moving toward the third option. Trump will be in that room with Hegseth, Witkoff, Rubio, and Sullivan, the same team that ordered Operation Midnight Hammer in June 2025, the same team that authorized the February 28 strikes, the same team that looked at Iran's first paper on Saturday and said, not good enough, then saw a better paper 10 minutes later and still said, not good enough. That team is making a decision Monday that may determine whether there is a 4th round of strikes before a deal or a deal before a 4th round of strikes. And the telephone is still waiting. Now, let me talk about what happened in Oman, because Araghchi's meeting with Sultan Haytham was not a courtesy call, and it was not peripheral to the main story. It was the main story. It just did not get treated that way. Oman's Sultan meeting with Iran's foreign minister personally, not through an aide, not through the foreign minister, but the Sultan himself. That is a signal. Sultans do not hold meetings with foreign ministers about logistics. They hold meetings when there is a strategic conversation to have. And the strategic conversation in Muscat on Sunday was about Hormuz, specifically whether Oman will participate in a new framework for managing the strait. Oman sits at the mouth of Hormuz. Oman's coast is the southern boundary of the passage. Any maritime framework for Hormuz that does not include Oman is a framework without physical meaning. Iran knows this. Iran was in Muscat on Sunday to find out if Oman is in. Oman's response was not made public. The AP reported that Oman's response was not immediately clear, but the meeting happened. The Sultan sat down. The photograph exists. And Araghchi, who spent 48 hours flying between Pakistan, Oman, and Russia, chose to make Oman the middle stop, not a side trip, the middle, between the written messages to America and the meeting with Putin. That sequencing tells you something about the order of importance. Now let me steelman Trump's position, because the telephone comment is easy to mock, and I want to make sure I am giving the American side a fair hearing. Trump is right that the pressure is accumulating. Iran's internet has been blacked out for 56 days. 3,400 Iranians have been killed since February 28th. The shadow fleet is running, but cannot fully replace the oil revenue Iran is losing. Cog Island storage is filling. The blockade has redirected 37 ships. The IRGC on Saturday warned that continued blockade, banditry, and piracy would face a strong response. But that warning itself tells you something. Countries issue warnings about responses they have not yet delivered when they are not yet in a position to deliver them. If the IRGC could deliver a strong response right now, it would have delivered it instead of announcing it on Telegram. And the global economic cost of all of this is landing on everyone, not just Iran. Trump and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer spoke on Sunday specifically about what Downing Street called the urgent need to get shipping moving again in the Strait of Hormuz. Starmer warned of severe consequences on the global economy and the cost of living of people in the UK. That conversation happened because British consumers are already feeling the oil shock. German industry is entering recession. Asian markets fell last week on Hormuz uncertainty. The pressure is not only on Iran, but it is more immediately life-threatening to Iran's government, and Trump is right about that asymmetry. Trump is right that Iran came to him with something. The written messages exist. The three-phase proposal exists. Iran is not walking away from the negotiation. Iran is in Islamabad for the second time in 48 hours. Iran is in Oman. Iran is in Moscow. Iran is making calls to Egypt, France, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey simultaneously. A country with no interest in a deal does not do all of that in one weekend. That level of activity signals urgency, not confidence. And urgency is pressure. Here is where the steelman collapses. There is a telephone. But a telephone cannot solve a sequencing problem. Iran says lift the blockade and give us security guarantees before we discuss nuclear. America says surrender the nuclear stockpile before we lift the blockade. A phone call does not resolve that sequence. A phone call is two people restating incompatible positions in a different medium. The fundamental problem is not a communication problem. It is a trust problem built on the wreckage of the JCPOA. And the JCPOA did not fail because of poor phone coverage. Arakchi was part of the team that negotiated the JCPOA in 2015. He watched Trump exit it in 2018 without Iran violating a single provision. The IAEA confirmed Iran's compliance at the time of withdrawal. Iran gave up its uranium. Iran accepted inspections. Iran reduced its centrifuge count, and America left anyway. No phone call changes that institutional memory. No secure line makes that history disappear. Iran is not refusing to talk because it cannot find a telephone. Iran is refusing to talk under blockade because the last time it gave America what America asked for, America walked away and then bombed it. And here's the specific thing about the three-phase proposal that the telephone comment misses entirely. Iran has sent America written red lines, not spoken, written, on paper, through Pakistan. That is Iran creating a record, a document, a thing that exists outside of any phone call, that Pakistan now holds, that can be produced in any international forum, that can be cited in any future negotiation about who said what and when. If America rejects these red lines verbally or by pointing at a telephone, and then the war resumes, Iran will say, "We gave you our conditions in writing through your own chosen mediator in a document you can read right now, and you responded by pointing at a telephone." That document protects Iran in every court of international opinion that matters. The Arab League, the UN Security Council, the Global South. Every country that is watching how this war ends and deciding which side of the next crisis to stand on. Iran handed those countries a document. America handed Iran a telephone number. That asymmetry is what China is watching, not the telephone, not the three phases. The asymmetry between a country that is building a paper trail and a country that is saying, call us. Because the country that builds a paper trail is the country that controls the historical record. And the country that controls the historical record controls the narrative of what happened when this war eventually ends. China has been building paper trails in international forums for decades, 5-point initiatives, bilateral frameworks, joint statements. China is watching Iran do the same thing and saying nothing publicly, because you do not interrupt a student while they are learning the right lesson. This is where China enters the picture. And this is what I mean when I say China watched both. China was in Vienna on April 24th, coordinating with Russia and Iran and the IAEA before Arakchi flew to Islamabad the first time. China is buying 985,000 barrels of Iranian crude per day through the blockade. China's defense minister stated publicly that Chinese ships enter and exit Hormuz under agreements with Iran and America should not interfere. China has said nothing about the three-phase proposal. China has said nothing about the written red lines. China has said nothing about the telephone. But China is watching the written messages arrive in Islamabad and watching America's response be a phone suggestion. And China is calculating something that neither Iran nor America is saying out loud. What China knows is this: the three-phase proposal, if America rejects it and the stalemate continues, pushes the war toward a resolution that can only come through escalation or through a framework that requires a third-party guarantor. If Iran cannot get America to accept phase one security guarantees bilaterally, and if Russia's uranium custody offer stays rejected as it was in March, the only remaining mechanism is one where China steps in as the guarantor of the whole agreement, not just the nuclear part, the whole thing. The ceasefire guarantees that tell Iran America will not bomb it again. The Hormuz framework that tells the world how the strait will be governed. The nuclear endgame, all of it, under Chinese guarantorship. That is the position China is building toward. Not loudly, not with statements, not with military deployments, with silence and oil purchases, while Iran hands America written red lines and America says there is a telephone. And here is the thing about Chinese guarantorship that changes everything. If China guarantees the ceasefire permanence, any future American president who wants to resume the war has to explain to China why it is breaking a guarantee that China backs. If China guarantees the Hormuz framework, any future American president who wants to blockade Iran's ports again has to do it against a China-backed maritime arrangement. And if China guarantees the nuclear endgame, the JCPOA exit of 2018 becomes structurally impossible to repeat because you cannot exit a China-guaranteed agreement without triggering the US-China confrontation that America is not ready for, particularly while the tariff war is already stressing the relationship and the Beijing summit is coming up. That is not a hypothetical future. That is what China is positioning itself for right now silently. While Trump says there is a telephone and Iran sends written red lines through Pakistan. There is a telephone, and China is waiting for the moment when America realizes the call it needs to make is not to Tehran. Watch the Situation Room Monday. Watch whether America sends a written response back through Pakistan in the next 48 hours. Watch whether Oman announces any framework on Hormuz management in the coming days. And watch whether China breaks its silence, because when China speaks, it will not be to support or oppose any specific proposal. It will be to offer to guarantee whatever framework the other parties have built. And that offer will be the moment this war finds its architecture. Iran sent America written red lines. Trump said use the telephone. China watched both and said nothing. Watch what China says next. If you found this useful, push back on it in the comments. I will see you in the next one.